Alright, here we are on Lesson 10, Interpreting Graphs of Proportional Relationships. So, we're kind of putting everything all together. This is our last lesson before our test, but now we're including some graphs. So, one note that I want you to write up at the top, put a little star. So there's 2 points you always need on a proportional graph. So put 2 points, always needed on proportional graph. Alright, and those 2 points are 0, 0, which is the origin, and then 1, comma, r, where r equals the unit rate, which we've talked about. Okay, so we're going to keep that in mind as we go through this example, the next example today. So example 1 says Grandma's special chocolate chip cookie recipe, which yields 4 dozen cookies, calls for 3 cups of flour. So using this information, we have to complete all of these boxes. So first we need to figure out our x and our y. And remember, we're talking about x's and y's in terms of inputs and outputs. So our input here would be the flour. So this is going to be x, and our output would be the cookies, which will be y. So first here in the box it says to create a table comparing the amount of flour used to the amount of cookies. So we have flour and we have cookies. Alright, and this is in dozens. So make sure you add that in there, else you'll be very confused. So for 3 cups of flour, we know that they get 4 dozen cookies. So now if we were to put in a few more values in here, for 6 cups of flour, they would get 8 dozen cookies. For 9 cups of flour, they would get 12 dozen cookies. And we'll do one more. For 12 cups of flour, they'd get 16 dozen cookies. So for the flour column, you see here that we are adding 3 every time. And for the cookie column, we are adding 4 every time. Alright, and then the next box it says, is the number of cookies proportional to the amount of flour used? So we would say yes, and that's because there is a constant. Alright. The next part is asking about the unit rate of cookies to flour. And what is the meaning in the context of the problem? So unit rate, we're talking about our k value, which we know is y over x. And our y here is cookies, so it would be 4 over our x, which is flour, would be 3. So now, but if we're going to find the unit rate, we're finding how much for 1. So if we actually do 4/3. This is the same thing as 1 1/3. So it'd be 1 1/3 dozen cookies per 1 cup of flour. So remember, unit rate, write yourself a note, is how much for 1. Alright, and again, we don't need a calculator here. We can just keep it as a fraction or a mixed number. The next box says to model the relationship on a graph. So my flour is my x, which is on the bottom. My cookies, or dozen cookies, is my y. Alright, and I'm just going to count by ones here for all of these boxes. So if we're going to plot our points, our first point would be at 3, so 1, 2, 3, and then up to 4, 1, 2, 3, so right here, thicker pen. And then our next point would be at 6, so 3, 4, 5, 6, then up to 8, 5, 6, 7, there's 8. Oops. And then my next point would be at 9, so 6, 7, 8, 9, and then up to 12, so 9, 10, 11, 12 would be here. And then my last point will be at 12, so 9, 10, 11, 12, and then up to 16, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. Alright, I'm going to connect these points. My line's not very straight. That's alright. And then make sure you do have some number labels down here. It's easier for you guys to write on your paper than for me to write on the screen. But then the next question asks, does the graph show the two quantities being proportional to each other? And we know we can say yes, because it is a straight line. And it goes through the origin. And then the last question says to write an equation, so we're going to use our y equals kx still. And we know y equals our k was 4/3 x, and that is our equation. Alright, so pretty much just pulling everything all together here. We're going to do one more example all together. We're going to go over to the next page, example 2. And it says, below is a graph modeling the amount of sugar required to make Grandma's chocolate chip cookies. So they give us a graph. And the first one says to record the coordinates from the graph in a table, and what do these ordered pairs mean? So we're just going to write them as ordered pairs. So the first one I see here is at 2, 3. And this means for 3 dozen cookies, you need 2 cups of sugar. And then we'll just pick one more here. This is at 4, 6. 4, 6. So that means for 6 dozen cookies, you need 4 cups of sugar. Alright, so that's part D. Part E says Grandma has 1 remaining cup of sugar. How many dozen cookies will she be able to make? So we need to first figure out what our K would be. Alright, our K, and well, actually if we think back to the first page, we talked about this point 1 comma R, where R is our unit rate. So we need to find our K, which is y over x. So, and I'm just going to take that first point, so we're going to use 3 over 2. But if we're talking how much for 1, we would say that this is 1.5. So our point would be 1 comma 1.5. So we could say that she could make 1.5 dozen cookies. Alright, and then it does say to plot it on the graph, so go ahead up here and we're going to plot 1 comma 1.5, which is going to be right here on the line, which is good. That means that we did it correctly. And then the last question says, how many dozen cookies can Grandma make if she has no sugar, and then can you graph it on the coordinate plane? So if she has no sugar, she can make no cookies because she's missing an ingredient. Alright, the point though, if there were 0 cups of sugar, she would have 0 cookies. And yes, we can plot that. And then it asks, what do we call this point? We say this is called the origin. Alright, so that's it for that page. I want you to flip over to the next page though, and I want you to try this whole page on your own. Alright, give it your best shot. We do need to try these questions, and then we will go over all of them in class tomorrow.